Morning. Let's take a look at building our first material now, and you'll start understanding where I'm going with this. Well, hopefully you'll start understanding where I'm going with this. There is an asset pack folder. If we go over to our Blackboard, you'll see UE4 assets. If you click on that, it's going to take you into my drive space. Please let me know that you can get access to this. There's a texture pack folder, and that is going to download these textures. These are my textures. You cannot use these textures. Use of these textures in your levels will give you a 0. Okay. You cannot download other people's textures. You cannot download them from the internet anywhere. I find one, you get 0. You must paint all your own textures, okay, and create all of your own textures. Now, again, if you really do it in a smart way, you're going to find that it's actually not that hard. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at using some of these tileable textures first, and a couple different ways of being able to utilize these tileable textures that I've got going on here. We'll come to these trim sheet ones at another time in another video, but right now let's get started with our basic scene. And I've reopened the level that I saved before. I could create a test level in here if I want and create a new level. And I'm going to call this L underscore test level. The problem with doing this underscore pen, I said underscore pen, is that if I go and open that level, there's not going to be anything in it at all, which is a bit of a problem. We're going to have to go in and add stuff to it. So one of the ways to do it, if you've got that base level that we worked with here, I'm going to say don't save again. I don't want to save that level I just made. So I've got this base one. You can right click on it and say duplicate, and then call this L underscore test and pen. And so if I double click on it now, it's going to say, I'm going to say don't save the original one. Here's that one duplicated. So I can use this one as a junk level. I'm going to go Control Shift S, make sure I save everything. And so I can use this as a dumping ground to test things. Okay. I won't open this. I really don't care what's in it, but I do expect it named correctly. Okay. So this is just for you to dump stuff into. So we're going to be using a sphere. So I'm going to go up to basic and I'm going to go and grab a sphere and I'm going to drop that out here and maybe just roll around. Oh, F is frame just like it is in Maya. You can just hit frame when you have something picked. And I'm going to drop in a cylinder and I'm going to slide that right there. And I'm going to drop in a cube and I'm going to drop that right there so I can see my materials on all the objects as we go here. So I'm just going to save again, just in case for whatever reason I crash. Control Shift S, that saves everything essentially that's going on. Over to the materials folder where we're going to build our materials. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose material. And this is going to be named correctly. So it is M underscore and I'll just call this test for now. Maybe we'll call it something more specific. We'll call this dirt. You'll see where I actually don't even want them to be specific names. Of course, pen on the end, underscore pen, so I know it's my dirt. Okay. And then double click on this to open it. And what it opens up is what you would think of as the material editor. I'm just going to dock it to the top. Now, it's a little bit different than the material editor, say in Max, where essentially you've got this open space and you can make as many shaders as you want, and you can make as many materials as you want. This is one material here, so this is just this material. You can't sort of start another whole material in here. It starts off with the shader available to you that you're going to be using. And you've got a pile of inputs into that for all sorts of stuff. Now, what's interesting is you'll notice there's a lot of them that are actually grayed out. And they're grayed out because game engines need to optimize like crazy. So with that selected down over here on the lower left-hand side, you can see some of the material properties. So things like surface domain. If I go to volume, you'll notice different ones show up, other ones get turned off post-process. So user interface, what can be actually show up in a user interface one? So we're going to leave it on surface because we want to, material as surface essentially. And then there's other things like blend modes and whatnot, and that's going to change and open and close different ones depending on the kind of inputs that we're required for that material. We never want more than what we need, okay? Over on the left-hand side, we can zoom and orbit this just the same way we do the viewports. It's a sphere coming up. You can tell it to be a cylinder or a box or whatever else. It may take a second to draw properly depending on the speed of your video card. I've got a pretty old 1060 that's getting awful old here. You can also load in, a specific mesh. I don't bother doing that. Just, it's going to slow things down. That, and it's going to end up being real time in your viewport in the actual game level as you work. And if you're like me with double monitors, or in this case now 3 monitors, you can be working on one with your material shader work and seeing it update automatically in your game level. Wonderful real-time rendering, eh? So with that, we need to go back and we need to import a texture. So we've got textures. I'm going to make some folders in here again and break this down. And I'm going to call this ground textures, or sort of ground, however you spell it right. And to break this down. And so from my test here, I'm going to go in and grab some of my ground ones. Now you can go through the process of importing them. So you can say import and import them in, but you can also drag and drop them. Now I'm using a Faststone image viewer here that I've shown you before that I use for navigating images quickly on my drives. I really like this tool. It's free, it's open source, or I don't think it's open source, but it's free. So it's just kind of really easy. I'm going to grab these ones here, and I'm going to drag and drop those into Unreal to get myself started, and it drops them in. And again, you can see the little asterisks coming up. That asterisk tells us that it needs to be saved. Sort of, it's in there, but it needs to be saved, or else we could lose it. So Control-Shift-S, make sure we don't have that asterisk. And if we double click on one of these assets, it's going to open up that asset. So this is the texture. Now, again, like I said, it's not referencing this image, okay, like it does in Max or Maya. It's actually made a copy of it. It's rewritten the file into the Unreal Engine format. So it's no longer a JPEG per se, okay? Once we're into the settings for it, well, what we've got then is we've got settings that we can manipulate this image. Believe it or not, you can actually resize the image. Right now it says imported 512, displayed at 512. You can actually change it and change what it's going to be displayed as. We need files or images as small as they can be so we can maintain speed. Now back in our material, we can add them. Probably the easiest way to add them is literally just drag and drop. So if I peel that material tab off, leave it floating up above, and again, if it's second monitor, it's even easier. We can drag one in. So I'm just going to drag that in there and plug it back in. So with the texture sample in there, we have multiple inputs, multiple outputs. This looks just like Maya and Max and Blender and everything else, so that we can start building material trees. Now with the texture samples, it's directly sampling this texture off of the drive. So it's pulling this in. It's allowing us to be able to manipulate the UV set. And we could even override the texture coming in. And we have multiple outputs, so we could take just the red, green, the blue, the alpha, the RGBA, all of them, or just the RGB. We want just the RGB in this case. I want to plug that into the base color. Give it a second. What it's going to do is it's going to compile the material so that we've got nice shiny dirt. Okay. Now it's nice shiny dirt because this is a realistic shader. It's got metallic, specular, and roughness being plugged in here. And what we want to do is we want to control those. And probably the easiest right now is just with a float value. If I dial down the specular to 0, then I won't have any specular on there. So how on earth do you do that? Well, we need one of these, and if you notice, there's lots of them. Okay, so you're going to get used to using lots of them. There's certain ones you're going to use all the time. One's going to be a constant here, so you'll notice there's a hotkey here. So what's really neat the way this works, if I drag a constant out, it'll create me a constant. I can now see I've got a value, a float value that I can dial in. The other way to do it, because it's one for the hotkey, is not just hitting one, but what you do is you hold down one and left click, and it'll create them for you. So you can create them on the fly really quick. So that's the best way to do it. So I'm going to take that. I really don't want any metallic. I don't want any specular. And in this case, I'm probably going to want to control roughness separately because I want this to be rough is what it boils down to. So I'm going to grab another one and plug it into my roughness. And then maybe turn some roughness up there to make sure it looks rough. Now turn the other ones down so it may not be that much of a concern, but you can see now it's starting to look like dirt. So here's something you've got to make sure. I can save this, and it's saved now, but I haven't applied it. And you're going to need to use the apply button. So let's just go back and I'll show you why as we start. I'm going to hit apply now anyways, and it compiles the shader. So a game engine, it isn't just like Max where whenever you hit render on Max or Maya or Blender or whatever, it goes and compiles all the materials basically for that rendered frame. That's why it can take longer as your materials get more and more complex. What Unreal Engine's doing is thinking like a game engine, and it's saying I need these materials, compiled down to code so that it's ready for the game effectively. So I'm going to go back to my material, and then I've got my material here. And let's just take a look at applying that material. So a couple different ways. One, I can just drag and drop it onto the object, and it's on there. If I pick the cylinder, for instance, you can see over the right-hand side, you can see the material here. I can drag and drop it into that slot and apply it. And on the box this time, what we're going to do is we're going to go do a search for it. And we can search for that material. And again, we can type a search in if we like, and I can apply it the same way. So it's going to give me that, in multiple different ways, essentially. So there's my dirt being applied to these objects. And that is like the sort of the simplest way to start getting materials in there now. So everything's been saved, but let's say we make a change to this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to say, hey, why is it, it's broken. Why is it broken? Let's make a change, and let's just disconnect all of these again and let it go all shiny. And to disconnect, you hold down Alt and click on them, and they'll disconnect them. We're back to shiny. And you go back and go, yeah, but why is my dirt not shiny? It should be shiny. Well, what you haven't done is hit the apply button. Let's recompile the material now. So we recompile it, and now you'll see it takes a second, and all of a sudden all our dirt's shiny again. Okay, so we probably only need enough roughness, as I'm thinking. Well, the shine still needs to come down. I think the specular is defaulted to 1. So we'll want to take that. I think metallic is always defaulted to 0. But I always plug it in there if I wanted to get rid of metallic, so I kind of know I've done it. And there you go. And again, apply, and you'll see it takes a second as it compiles it. And there's our compiled materials. Next video, we're going to come back and we're going to make this more complex, and we're going to start looking at how to make materials like you saw in mine, where you can move a piece of ground and it slides through the material with the world aligned texture.